Hunter mirror or OTK Demon Hunter versus Garrote Rogue, right? Because the skill cap of those decks is so astronomically high that sometimes even explaining why the things they're doing so cool is difficult. But in a handlock mirror, I think it's just in that sweet spot where players can absolutely outplay each other, but it's kind of visible and clear because handlock play more resembles what people are used to seeing as Hearthstone, right? You play big threats, you try and attack aggressively with them, you fight for tempo, you try and dominate the board. So I think this would be a great way to kick off the day, hopefully, between two fantastic players.
Well, let's dive in now. All on the line for these players, of course. A loss here does not mean they're out because they had a decent seeding, but still they will want to get off on the best start possible and move on to that winner's match against Frenetic. So far, nothing too crazy. A Netheron in Jarla's opening hand will give him the want to at least heavily tap, maybe drop it down early. Do you think an early Netheron is super important in this specific matchup?
I think it's very, very powerful, yeah. I think problem is if you don't also hit backfire, the amount of turns you need to do nothing can then be a bit punishing because your opponent might have gained enough tempo in the meantime to get there. But the backfire into a Netheron curve, I think, is one of the strongest things you can possibly do.
Jarla now has choices, right? He could tap still this turn, excuse me, but this is the turn where you can do other things, right? You could just play a null out, is a null one turn before, and a Netheron could happen, worthwhile. He's going to choose to tap instead, might even go for preloading the tour guide.
Yeah, I do like this. He is doing nothing, essentially, but it does mean next turn he can have a big turn with an Netheron and a Gulcher null at an absolute minimum. Has to think about implications of hand size. If he plays a tour guide here, he's not going to be filling up his hand immediately, but he gets to fill up his hand for 0 mana on the following turn anyway because of the nature of the life tap. So I think that's absolutely fine. The other consideration is, do I want to give my opponent a Mortal Coil target, a touch of the Dathrasem target, an Unstable Shadow Blast target for massive quest completion and more Flesh Giant discounts? These are all things that you've got to consider in those spots.
Yeah, also as well, I do think we might have seen it more likely to be skipped if there was a Raised Dead for Jarla, because suddenly when you can start just churning out a Netherons, maybe with a null as well, those boards become very, very awkward to deal with back-to-back for the average Warlock turn. But no Raised Deads for now.
Alright. Tapper, 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 tapper.
And still play the Netheron null.
More bones to gnaw.
Alright, he's gonna go null. I've seen some people just choose to spend mana in that position and like play the Bloodshard Bristleback. You know, idea being the null can actually be a nice reactive card, right? If your opponent wants to counter with an Netheron or a Giant on their own, you then have this like cheap removal piece. But I think since everything kind of got more expensive in the handlock mirror, no Rod anymore being played, Giants being nerfed, things generally slowed down a little bit. It's very rare in this situation when you make this bigger board that they're going to be able to kill your stuff and play a big threat on the other side, right? Where you would feel like you'd need a big rush minion in your hand to be able to counter.
Yeah, of course. Normally one thing or another. Imagine Seiko will be looking at some kind of way to clear this up. Although he can't, because his other removal tool is actually Drain Soul at 2 mana, so he can't Soul Rend Drain this turn. Maybe he just Soul Rends, yeah, and just waits to do it next turn. This also makes Raised Dead a little bit worse. For Jarla, of course.
Yeah. I'd love there to be a Raised Dead in this hand just so we could talk about whether Jarla would Mortal Coil his own Netheron in there. Just essentially to heal it, right? You get to full heal your Netheron for 1 mana, basically. Well, 2 mana, I guess, if you have to spend the coil as well to do it.
You would draw a card, though, so yeah, we could definitely talk about that. Maybe this is a Bristleback turn.
Could be.
Open up some hand space. I think Neophyte will want to be saved for when the Giant comes down.
Mm-hmm.
The hour is close at hand.
Do you think Bristleback here is a reasonable push, right? He's got 2 of them anyway. He's a long way off 10 cards. He's pressuring Seiko down a lot. I think it's a very throwawayable minion right now.
Muzzle their magic.
Oh, he's going to go
Throwawayable, you
neophyte.
say?
Yeah. Oh, this is going to have to be another Soul Rend, right?
Is it? Interesting. 17 cards remaining, no backfire yet. Playing both of your Soul Rends for essentially 3 cards total does not seem very exciting. Looking in this neophyte a bit more closely, I think if Jarla has been counting Giant from his opponent, it's actually pretty smart because it blocks Drain Soul Flesh Giant exactly, right? And Drain Soul is a pretty likely card for your opponent to have with the play that they made, softening up the Enethron, looking to kill it over 2 turns.
Haven't heard of me?
Alright, Seiko just going to turbo through some Drain Souls here, try and pick up some added discounts for the Flesh Giant. Does have Raised Dead in hand, so a weak-looking Tammy 1 is not the end of the world because Seiko can throw it into that Raised Dead pool, maybe get it back again later. But still just keeps giving turn after turn of tempo back over to Jarla. Jarla's had free reign so far this matchup to just develop whatever he wants onto the board on any turn.
It's been a really weird hand for Jarla as well because he has been piling on the pressure, of course, but he hasn't really heavily live tapped or got hold of the additional card draw, mainly that backfire. So his hand is getting clogged up a little bit here because now he has the 2 Baron Scavengers, the 2 Bristlebacks that he really wants to wait, but that's 5 cards time. That feels like a long time away.
I mean, the crazy part is even though it feels like Jarla has drawn slowly, and you are right, Seiko's played a Soul Rend and is actually 2 cards behind in terms of draw than Jarla is because he's been forced to just relieve pressure the entire game so far.
And the Soul Rend was for 1, wasn't it? Because it didn't kill the Enethron, so...
Yep.
Big deal. Jarla's just going to peel away this Tamsin. Just to drop this Giant down seems good enough to me. Plus another threat check in front of Seiko. Now we, of course, in Battleground Battlemaster territory quite easily.
Don't think that was an easy choice from Jarla either, because we were talking about how slow the card draw has been so far for both of these players. Of course, doing it that way meant that the healing procced, which meant the Giant came down, which I do agree with, right? Jarla has not let a single turn pass since the first Enethron where he hasn't played threats to actually pressure the opponent. And I think keeping that up for as long as he can is a good idea. But again, doing that in the other order gets you a Mortal Coil, and then maybe that Mortal Coil gets a backfire, and then that backfire gets you to 10 cards, and then your hand just explodes, right? Because you have everything that you possibly need once you hit that 10-card threshold.
Seiko's a really good swing turn here, right? He can Drain Soul, Soul Rend to discard 2, and then still play a Flesh Giant quite easily. Gonna go Tamsin instead.
Heard of me?
Raise Dead first. Tamsin Soul Rend, Drain Soul, get another Soul Rend back. Is that the plan here? Because this Drain Soul doesn't do anything. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, looks like it.
I'm on board with this. Burns an extra card. Doesn't allow him to get the Giant down this turn, but does set him up for bigger swing turns in the future, right? It's getting him nice and close to that 10-card breakpoint with the backfire. So now on the following turn, he can really explode on the board, especially if he hits another Giant at this point off the draws that he'll have next turn.
Jarla could go tap Altar of Fire here and get his Baron Scavengers down first. Now he wouldn't have to Altar of Fire, so fair enough. That's arguably a lot better.
Yeah, but already now you have to start thinking about, okay, where's this game going? Has my opponent stabilized? Are we now in a Tammy 2 battle? Because if you get into a Tammy 2 battle, at the end of the game, you'd actually much rather have a backfire than an Altar of Fire. Not necessarily true, because over the course of the entire game, they do both get rid of 3 cards from your deck, but backfire also does an additional 3 damage to you that you can use in that Tamsin position. It allows for that burst kill at the end of the game, even if over the entire course it does work out relatively evenly. But yeah, I think all things considered, backfire here is insane because of the additional upside of potentially that Giant, but it's just 1 mana too expensive. The nerfs, Raven, they're real.
It took us weeks, but we've seen them have an effect. Hey, though, even though he knows there's Soul Rend, he's seen a lot of single target removal from Seiko this game.
Yeah.
So it's fair to feel reasonably confident that these scavengers have a good chance at living, but now we can see, oh, the options are there now, aren't they? He can Soul Rend, touch, Bristleback this turn, and Scavenger.
Good lord.
And
Zero
Giant.
mana Soul Rend is so disgusting. Every time I look at a hand with 0 mana Soul Rend in, I'm just like, yeah, you should just do this every game in every matchup. Like, it's just so strong. When people were cutting Tamsin, do you remember that weird period of time?
Yeah, I didn't understand it either. Not the odd one. Well, if he's playing this, I guess he isn't going drain Soul Rend.
No. Like he's holding on to it.
Muzzle their magic.
Puts forward an aggressive board, but Jarla just getting to sit and keep this Scavenger is a huge deal. You have here Bristleback, touch, and then just leaves the 3-2 and he can play the Giant. Again, does he want to commit that many minions to the board knowing there's a Soul Rend in hand? That's the big question here for Jarla, I think.
Right. Still step 2 of the quest here, so this will be another 3 damage proc, but even with Battle Master, would not have been lethal. He does have his own Tamsin options because of the Cult Neophyte effect on the other side, but nothing really leaping out at me here. The only useful card right now being the Touch, and that does not really pay off particularly big through the repeated Cult Neophyte effects.
That is my correction.
Muzzle their magic.
Jarla taking his time on that one. Just managing to push the 6 to face. Now it's Seiko's turn to more than likely clear up this board. He can trade in the Neophyte. He can kill the rest of the Giant with the Bristleback he has. There's no lethals, right?
Whoa, you're an ambitious boy. Okay. What are you looking
That's
at?
21 if he could have killed the Scavenger, right? Which he can.
Has 22, yeah. He has 22. He's actually just one off this turn, yeah.
See, ambition kind of works sometimes.
I mean, story of your life, right? Ambitious, and you just come up a little bit short every time.
I don't know, I'm casting the playoff settle and I feel like I've done my job well.
I was about to make the really cruel joke again, and I won't. They would have heard it this time as well, and I bottled it.
Seiko can now just clean this up no problem, get the Scavenger on board, and again start to threaten his own lethal, because the big difference in this game, really, at least for this end game state, is Seiko has had the Battleground Battlemaster in hand for the majority of this game, and Jarla has not. So even though you can start to threaten it and your opponent doesn't know you've not got it, it's still a tough one when you don't have it in hand. You know if your minions stick, you're going to be in trouble, and that was not the best raised dead I've ever seen here. Tour Guide, Cult Neophyte, none of the big threats.
It wasn't. He's still okay this turn, though. Still has a Bristleback, Drain Soul, Touch, Tamsin, any combination of the above things to be able to clear this up. The problem is he's not then going to be able to really counter-swing with an effective threat of his own, and as a Flesh Giant appearing there would have allowed him to do.
Yeah, even Null and Netheron, Flesh Giant, all of those are in the pool. Scavenger. There was a lot of good cards he could have got there, and he got the 2 weakest ones.
Is close at hand.
Jarla in a spot of bother here because now he's in the position where we're talking about how symmetrical these altars of fire are, but if Jarla gets into a position where he's not using his whatsoever, Seiko can essentially just do it with no particular downside here. Yeah, which is why I think you are seeing it happen for Jarla in that position, because otherwise you could have just seen Seiko get down into that position, burn the remaining cards from his opponent's deck, get his Tamsin 2 activated, get that in play, and just be way ahead of the game with Jarla taking actual fatigue damage. Of course, you can argue that pushing another Warlock further towards fatigue is actually beneficial for them, but I think if you do so before they've actually completed their quest, it is still a big struggle for them to get out of, because they start taking way too much damage from that fatigue than they're able to handle, especially in Seiko's position where he's just been so low the entire game because of all of that early pressure from Jarla.
Yeah, and even to get the Tamsin up, right, you've got to complete the quest, which Seiko will do guaranteed next turn anyway, but also there's 5 mana to play it, then you've got to, let's say you tap, like that's very slow, it's a very overall slow turn, especially if you're already on the back foot. Seiko is going to respond with his...
Double Soul Rend. Jarla's just struggled for removal just this entire game because of the lack of those Soul Rends. And now just losing them both from the bottom of the deck. And there is a one-man, one-mana army at the bottom. A tour guide against the world.
Yep. And the less often seen 6-mana Netheron still big enough and scary enough to get the job done here. What can Jarla even do now? He only has touch.
Currently needs 5 damage to complete the final step, get Tammy 2. So a backfire, for example, would do it, but do way too much damage. 1, 2, 3, and plus the 3 from the actual backfire itself would be 9. Does still have the Tamsin in play. He is going to go for it, though. Okay.
Yeah, I think the problem is, does he just have a choice, right? Like, if he doesn't play Tamsin this turn, does he ever win? Can he wait a whole turn again? He knows Battlemasters available for Seiko as well.
Now he goes Tour Guide, tap, still has the Touch available. Problem is the Touch doesn't actually do anything unless he trades 2 minions.
Oh, wait.
Oh, it's just lethal. Oh, no, my bad. I just wasn't paying attention.
Oh.
Because of the 1 extra damage. Yeah, the 1 fatigue tick on the other side is why I wasn't counting. Well spotted from Jarla in the end. Nicely done. Absolutely my mistake. Wasn't accounting for the fact that Seiko's Tamsin had not come into play on the previous turn, which meant the 1 tick of fatigue was still happening on the other side, and that made all the difference to being able to end the game. That is a very unique way to see a game end, with actually fatigue damage happening, completing the quest, and then actually the quest reward going off as you're dying. Not actually something that I've ever particularly seen before. But a good spot there from Jarla at the end of the game.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly showing fatigue there, but that was good, right? Like, Jarla did not have any more time to get anything done, right? Because he knew Battleground Battlemaster was down. He knew he could not clear the whole board, and if more or less anything hit him with Wind Fury that turn, he was going to die. So Jarla just about scraped through that one, and that is a huge win again. This is effectively a mirror series for all realistic purposes here. So not only obviously going 1 game up, winning the Warlock mirror, all these are big boxes being ticked here from Jarla, getting off to a great start there, and that was a tricky one.
Yeah, so after the 1, 2, 3 of the backfire, you get the 4 and the life tap coming through for 2. And then just completely failing to account for the fact that once you pass back over, that fatigue's hitting on the other side. It's only the fact that Seiko had taken 1 extra fatigue already, that wasn't just an exact lethal setup. But yeah, good recognition from Jarla. I was far too concerned about the overkill of the damage that the backfire did in the first place, but Jarla rightly recognizing that he just had a clean lethal setup, because actually pushing that fatigue counter above where it needed to be was beneficial, because he still had that tap left afterwards to be able to do massive damage with the fatigue tick that came afterwards. So great spot from Jarla. Solid ending to the Warlock mirror, but I think rewarded by all that early pressure that he had in the opening turns of the game, right? Starting with that Netheron basically on curve, just left Seiko at such a low health total the entire time.
Yeah, and I am starting to see a bit of a theme kick in here, subtle, with mirrored lineups, double Druid Band, double Warlock opening. Now we're going to have a Demon Hunter mirror to continue this series. So players are really putting each other through their paces here in these mirror matches. And you can see again both players running that Magtheridon, which we didn't really see any of yesterday in the OTK Demon Hunters, I believe, unless I'm going crazy. So this will be something a little bit different for today, with Seiko and Jarla choosing to play this sort of additional tech card.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense that we're seeing it now and we didn't see it yesterday. For example, the decks that were targeting with Druid in mind yesterday were doing very, very different strategies from what we see here. Those were like the Libram Paladin Questro kind of lineups, or RDU's full aggro lineup. Whereas the OTK Demon Hunter, I think the Magtheridon coming in is for a couple of matchups, sure, but I think Druid is certainly one of them. It gives you a chance in that matchup to beat kind of a Celestial curve that you just don't really beat otherwise if they do it quickly enough. But because the other players that we saw were targeting Druids in very, very different ways that didn't really include Demon Hunter whatsoever, it's no surprise that we're only seeing it for the first time now. And these have been two of the players really responsible for the introduction of Magtheridon into European Grandmasters as well, as they have been going to it for a number of weeks now in this deck and a few others as well.
Yeah, and this mirror match is going to get pretty spicy, no doubt. Of course, there are certain draws and outcomes that can really hold one player back, but in general, we often see this this matchup ending with the player that loses being in that position where it's like, oh, well, if I don't die, I win next turn. They often go very, very close to each other in terms of kill time. Obviously, it is a mirror match, but it's very difficult for one player to really get that far ahead past the other one, because both decks are so efficient at doing what they want to do, which is drawing cards.
But they're also both so wonderful at disrupting their opponents from being able to do what they want to do, right? Because of Glide and because of the nature of the quest reward, it's super difficult to end a turn without the quest reward in your hand, right? Because most other quests are incremental, right? It's play a number of overload cards, play a number of SI cards. So you can get to 1 before your quest reward happens and then stop and then just do it all in one turn afterwards. Try and do that with Demon Hunter, the whole thing just resets, and then you have to draw 5 whole cards again going into the next turn. So it's almost impossible to complete quest in a timely manner with Demon Hunter while not leaving the Kurtrus in your hand. We saw it in ridiculous fashion in APAC with a turn 5 Kurtrus being played with the quest being completed on turn 5 as well. It was 5 cards drawn for 0 mana into Kurtrus coming down, but that is an anomaly. So generally, Glide can end up being super disruptive in this matchup as well, which is what makes it very bitty, very scrappy, and extremely difficult to play to have a consistent win rate in the mirror.
Pleasure doing business.
Okay, Jarla is going to attack with the weapon. Chose to just cycle that turn and not do anything with the second Tusk Piercer, which you see a lot of the time is like the override the Tusk Piercer with another one to then break it and then draw another card. But yep, did just choose to cycle and then call it a day.
Nice clean completion available this turn for Seiko. Has the mana to spend on the Tusk Piercer here as well. Now he can tradable again if he really wants to, and then the Sigil will get discounted to 0 because it was the first card drawn this turn to set him up perfectly for the next turn if he would like it.
And the overwrite allows him to preload that attack on the second weapon, which allows him to then draw additional cards. And now with that cheap acrobatics and the studies at 0, Seiko's at least right now in a strong position to really accelerate that quest progression, and I don't see a Glide anywhere for now.
Seiko considering whether to play the Sigil. I guess he's imagining worlds where he just jams Magtheridon on curve next turn, in which case he's going to be wasting the Sigil draws, essentially, right? He won't be completing a quest step on that turn, which is reasonable. It's a fair argument to hear, but I do think with the amount of card draw he has in hand already, studies card draw very often, acrobatics, of course, guaranteed 2 additional draws. Even without the Sigil, he is guaranteed another quest step. It's just whether he's guaranteed 2 in a timely manner. But I can respect holding on to it.
Demons.
Yeah, and there's no real way that Jarla can do much about the Magtheridon and the 1/3s, right? Like, they will be able to be killed very easily if Seiko gets hold of almost any removal. And then there's a 12-12 facing him down, so I do actually quite like this idea if Seiko does go for Megatherodon. On Jarla's side of the board, he is just going to keep drawing, keep up with Seiko with the quest progression. And also, to the surprise of no one, produce a ton more card draw, because that's just how the deck works.
It is indeed. Into that Tusk Piercer, nicely set up for the following turn now. Can find himself a glide off the double jump if he really feels he needs it, but more likely will find other methods of getting this quest completed on the following turn, or at least the second step of the quest completed on the following turn. But I think one thing he might just want to not be seeing here is the potential of the Magtherodon. I think Seiko opened a box there for Glide because Jarla sat with a full hand going into turn 4, so Seiko was very eager to punish him for that, if at all possible. In the end, decided not to. But now with a 0-mana Sigil runner, he still has some decisions to make about what he wants to do this turn. And yes, he is just powering through with a quest completion turn instead.
Yeah, and with double Guild Trader, he can just cycle those no problem. Get that proc done.
But yeah, I think you saw big hesitation from Jarla at the end of his last turn, right? He was sat there going, 7-card hand, one of them's the coin, 4 of them are discounted. My opponent has 4 mana. It's not a good look, is it? And he sat there thinking of if there was any world where he could coin something out, dump something, maybe studies, find a dumpable card from the studies with the coin, but it just wasn't really there. So I think in reaction to that, Seiko just said, all right, Illidari studies, let's find that glide. He did find it, but he found it much, much later than expected.
And now, weirdly enough, does this now dissuade him from playing the Sigil again because he doesn't want 2 cards in the way of this glide next turn? Will he be looking to only have the natural draw 1? Yeah. He's just decided he needs to glide.
He is dedicated. He is persistent. Seiko is trying to glide into them DMs.
Jarla here just... Let's have the card draw.
Pleasure doing
He's just
business.
doing it cleanly, which is all he'll be looking for here. And the ordering is always the difficult part for turns like this. Because you have studies affects the outcomes, double jump, then you want to play probably the card you draw off double jump, depending on what it is. Like, it gets very tricky to decipher what you're actually supposed to do or the order you're supposed to play all these card draws in.
Is somewhat exciting. Unfortunately, only 3 of 5 on the quest right now. Otherwise, you could just like swing weapon, coin Magtherodon still, and you'd be completing a quest step and playing Magtherodon, which would be pretty absurd.
Right.
But he's 1 draw off at this point.
I imagine he won't want to sacrifice it.
Yeah, no, I agree. He could have also still done that with the double jump, but then you're doing a very awkward thing with double jump where you're playing it and not dealing with the outcast card that you draw, and then it gets stranded mid-hand, and that all gets kind of awkward. So yeah, in the end, it just takes the discount off the persistent peddler, instead discounts the Magtherodon, throws it out, and still achieves very much the same thing. Nicely done.
Il'gynoth being drawn there for Seiko means that this glide is not going to do what he wants it to do this turn. Probably the worst card he could have possibly drawn.
Yeah, I agree. To be fair, I'm not a huge fan of the ambition play with the glide overall, right? Like, I don't think that's necessarily what Seiko was going for. Like, you still see here the upside of not playing the Sigil on the previous turn. If you're going to glide your hand at all, it's just better to hold on to the Sigil, right? Because then you get to refill after the fact anyway. But there's a lot of cards that you can draw on the right-hand side of one outcast card that get you in trouble. You know, double jump, spectral sight, acrobatics, anything that draws a card. The Organoth itself, Moargs that you draw, you're generally pretty sad about playing. You know, it's very, very awkward, and I think people tend to overestimate how often you can get away with that.
He's of course going to end up doing the self-glide to progress the quest. This will put him on Kurtrus in hand for next turn, and it's kind of weird how often I feel like you see the turn 6 Kurtrus, so there's always that question of what 1 mana are you doing on that turn as well, because it is pretty often you see it like straight after it would be naturally playable.
Oh, Spectral's insane. Jarla, having seen a natural glide and a natural Illidari studies already played from Seiko as well, can feel a little bit more confident about anti-glide setups. But I think he personally was digging for a glide himself in that position because there's nothing entirely necessary in his hand right now, and that's that dynamic we were talking about before, right? Pretty much unavoidable, but Seiko is sat there with his quest reward in his hand, so finding as many routes to glide as possible is the path through this turn for Jarla. Starts with the studies, no glide. Then the double jump, no glide. Those are basically the sum total of things that can hit glide at this point. Unless he wants to play like acrobatics, because still with a Illidari Studies discount in play, he would draw a 3-mana glide if it was exactly the second card out of his deck, but seems a little bit silly, I suppose. Spectral Sight, functionally the same thing, actually, right? 1 mana cheaper, but uses up the discount, so if that one card was exactly a 4-mana glide, he still would have got through it.
Right. He was going to clean this up and just go for Magtheridon instead, right? Not going to go too heavy on the card draw, too all in. Just going to take this opportunity, because that turn didn't quite go the way he wanted, to just say, okay, I have a 12-11. Like, you play that, you spend that 5 mana on Kurtrus, and I punch you for 12.
And Seiko says, I shall.
Yeah, you know what? Deal.
Yep. I mean, actually, yeah, deal. I will take the red box. Thank you very much. If I'm at 28 and you offer me playing my Kurtrus for 12 damage, I'm taking that every single time.
What if I offered you the mystery box?
The mystery box could have anything inside it, even a Kurtrus.
There you go. Not a great pickup here, but I think Seiko was expecting to just whiff a little bit, if you can even really call just drawing that card a whiff right now. Didn't think he was going to really explode that turn, so he's going to get hit for 12.
Yeah.
Then next turn is where things get crazy. And what can Jarla even do here? Is the best he's realistically got just get his quest done, kill Kurtrus, and push 12? Is that just the best outcome here?
I think that's a very reasonable goal to outline for your turn, yeah. I think if you can achieve that, you'll be pretty happy with yourself. Again, Moarg Artificer is probably the key component in getting that done, though, and not finding it so far for Jarla.
And also an I-beam that costs not 3.
Yes. Also very fair.
Another happy guildie.
Find Spectral, that is the quest completion. Plenty of room still in hand. Boy, that 7/7's annoying.
Yep. And the problem is, is Jarla at the point where he thinks he should just trade with the Magtheridon, because is 12 damage to face going to realistically help him more than defending against 7 damage at his own face? Oh, okay. So 27, effectively Jarla's at 20 this turn, and Seiko has active Kurtrus.
I like this, honestly, because this is a respectable bluff to say to Seiko that you have to, like, trade into my 12/11 and kill it, because, you know, normally, if your opponent hasn't played Kurtrus, you are absolutely unafraid of dying in every situation, right? However, here, Jarla would only need 4 damage, which, with a couple of discounted cards still in hand, is very reasonably represented with, you know, Il'gynoth, Fellscream Blast. If any of those tools have been discounted already, then there's a good chance you can deal 4 damage with 7 mana. So I think, you know, forcing Seiko to do the defensive thing is reasonable in this spot. Didn't work out. 7/2 is still in play, being able to truck away, but did arguably still slow down Seiko significantly on that turn.
Yeah, Seiko is set up very well for next turn, though, with double Outcast Spectral Sight if he needs it. It's absolutely incredible. And as always, the drawback of these quests that get active very, very quickly is that's 5 mana from Jarla already spent this turn. 2 mana floating. Does he just have to, again, just I-beam this This Kurtrus. Oh no, wait, he can go for Fellscream with the Moag. Okay, yeah, this is way better. Yeah, of course, of course.
He could have just fell screamed, yeah, as you say, which would have taken care of the big problem, but it also would have left a Moag on the board, which is probably death. So yeah, I think Arcanist fell scream at that point is the way to go. But Seiko's hand is just card draw in the right order, just ripping Spectral Sights from the left-hand side. 1 mana Acrobatics. This is the joy of post-Kurtrus Demon Hunter, one of the most fun things that you can do in a game of Hearthstone, I would say.
Let's pause for just a second. They weren't really the best Acrobatics cards, but he still has this second Spectral available to him.
Yeah, crucially, that I-Beam costs 1 no matter where it is in the hand, because it's discounted by 2, so it costs 1 in the middle, it costs 1 in Outcast as well. No big deal at all.
What about if it's 2 in from the left?
Yep, still costs 1.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Yep. Keep them coming. I've got all the answers, Raven. Can't trip me up.
3 in from the left.
It costs 1.
Okay.
Time grows short.
Asterisk, Cold Neophyte.
Another happy guilty.
What's it cost when it's been played?
Whoa! If an I-Beam falls in the woods, does it still heal for 3?
And now in a funny turn of events as well, it's now Seiko leaving up a Kurtrus, so Jarla can push 7 here. Jarla does have good card draw, but the problem is, I think at this point, Jarla's really looking for a glide, right? Because that Il'gynoth being 6 is a huge pain. Pretty much his whole hand at this point is too expensive to get anything done. Does hit the glide.
Yeah, that was a 2 out of 3, I think, at that point,
right.
to be hitting that glide. He just hasn't had one the whole game. But yeah, wants the Il'gynoth back in the deck as an absolute matter of priority here. 5 cards left in his opponent's deck. Like, does he hold any hope that he's alive?
Well, he's got to do something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's looking at this Rust Drop just to dump it so he doesn't draw it again. Which, again, reasonable.
Seems good.
You look like you
Could also just play the Persistent Peddler, yeah, like this as well. Because again, his goal is not to win the game this turn, right? That's pretty much impossible from this position. So just setting himself up with the most likely turn kill, I think, is pretty sensible. I like this.
Is there a big reason for him not to play Spectral this turn?
He also went face. I mean, not that particularly I can tell you, but he went face because of the second Persistent Peddler in Seiko's deck, which is something that we haven't talked about. But yeah, the hold on the Spectral site is certainly a particularly interesting question, has to be said.
I see.
Oh!
Was he playing around this?
You would expect so, right? It's a little bit odd because, again, I don't know exactly what the 6 cards are left that can disrupt it. Like, obviously, holding Spectral plays around the 1 glide, but that 1 glide has to go into Outcast position in your opponent's hand, which is a particularly small chance now because your opponent's very likely to have necessary combo pieces, right? Like every Moog, every Fellscream Blast, etc. that's left in your opponent's deck is an entirely necessary combo piece at this point. So there aren't necessarily cards that they can throw out just to dump in various positions. But this game, much like the Handlock Mirror, is starting to get very, very scrappy towards the end as neither player is quite securing the bag with the OTK.
A big question though here, Sol. How likely is this lethal from Jarla at this point? Because he has so much card draw available. He already has the Il'gynoth Fellscream Blast.
Yep. I mean, just with the Acrobatics and the Spectral Sight and the Natural Draw, he's seeing every card in his deck apart from 1, and then with Tradables left remaining, you'd have to think that he just gets there. Gets the card out of his hand, guaranteed 4 card draws as an absolute minimum. finds the Glide, finds a Moarg, finds the I-Beam, and now with Moarg, I-Beam, Guild Trader, Fell Screen Blast, everything put together, that is going to be 2-0 going down to Jarla at this point.
And what a set of games we've had so far. So tricky, so scrappy, like both players trying to do, not weird things, but slightly different things to not only progress their own game plan, but disrupt their opponents here. And it's led to both of these games being very strange. How often have you seen a Demon Hunter mirror where both players are effectively at fatigue? The loser of the game is one card left in the deck. It never really goes that late, I feel like, anyway, or at least that evenly late. And it was pretty crazy overall. So this series is really getting there now. I'm excited for what is, I'm sure, going to be the Rogue mirror next, because that's just how things have gone.
That's just the series, yeah. It's housekeeping on the last couple of turns, I suppose. Jarla's decision not to play the Spectral Sight. As we said, plays around Glide. I do think there has to be extremely minimal punish in terms of your draws to make that worth it. So then seeing the remainder of his deck, I do like it. The only draw immediately off the top that he would have been sketchy about playing there was the I-Beam, right? Because he wanted to be doing that last alongside everything else. 5 of the other draws he could just dump because they were part of his combo. In terms of how likely was it to be lethal, it was guaranteed because he drew 5 of his 6 cards guaranteed, only 1 card left in the deck. That card could have been either a Moarg or a Guild Trader or an I-Beam. Like, it didn't matter what the last card was. He was always going to have lethal with some various combination. And if a Guild Trader came out at the wrong time, he can just trade it back in for the other card that he needs in that position anyway. So that was a guaranteed lethal setup for Jarla, I believe. It was just a little bit surprising, honestly, that his opponent got down to 1 card left in.
Yeah, it never happened.
To kill him in that position, but there is, it's a tough one for sure. It's a horrible mirror to play from both sides. I mean, it's a horrible mirror in terms of the amount of drain that it puts on your mental state in terms of keeping track of everything. But I think it's a very, very entertaining mirror to play if you do like, thinking in depth about a lot of matchups. But Raven, we have Rogue on one side. What is the deck on the other? Can you confirm for us? Are we just playing mirrors?
No, we're not. It's going to be Warlock, unfortunately, yeah. We will get, there's a chance if Seiko starts to fight back, we will get a Rogue mirror potentially to end this series, but he is going back to the Warlock for now. This is Jarla's Garrote Rogue, of course. You can see the Guild Trader and the top end, no Kazakus in this list. And I quite like the Guild Trader. As we found out, or as we've already found out in Demon Hunter, Guild Trader does open up a ton of different options of ways to end games with combos. It's become obviously a standard in Demon Hunter now, and honestly I've played with it a little bit in this form of Rogue, and I actually quite like it because tradable can be extremely useful in the early game or mid game as well if you don't quite need that spell damage. Just being able to swap the card for another one, if that helps you hit field contact, Octo, Secret Passage, whatever you need. It's a card, a nice tech card, I think, for this one.
Seiko here, double backfire and Netheron. Okay. I mean that's a pretty aggressive opening. Jarla does have Shroud opening hands, which is never a bad start. There are, of course, more whiffs than hits when it comes to Shroud because you are basically looking to hit exactly field contact and exactly Octobot to be able to set yourself up for at least one powerful mid-game turn, and then from there figure out what your late-game plan is, whether it's get the second contact, shadow step your first contact, play a bit more aggressively for tempo, look for Kazakus Golems. All of these things become available in the mid-game, but you generally need your first field contact to get you there first.
Choose soon.
It's also very nice of these two players who are good friends and practice together to wear black and white respectively. So just really as what the heel face dynamic is between their two groups. Like that's some Cody Rhodes level storytelling there. Clearly Jarla the hero of the piece.
Yeah, if you actually know the players though, it's a tough sell because Seiko is very, very nice.
He's such a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy. So, for those who actually know these players, they're both just nice guys. It's great. Really cool play from Jarla as well. It's one I personally would struggle with is just committing minions this early in the game when you can see Shroud. I would have been tempted to dagger and then Shroud on 3 and then start to build a plan going into turns 4, 5, 6. But Jarla already just throwing some minions down, saying, maybe I can push a bit of damage, maybe I can use up some of Seiko's mana and stop him, necessarily live tapping or drawing every turn of the game. Push the 1.
Alright, no contacts, but does get second prize with the Octobots. Again, in APAC, we did see a pretty ridiculous draw from Alatemu, where he got, I think, 2/3 of the way through his deck without seeing an Octobot or a field contact. And it was in the Warlock matchup, where his opponent then gleefully Altar of Fired away all of those cards from the bottom of his deck.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No contact is picked up now, and is this a good enough hand to get a reduction down, Sottle, or do you think it's a little bit too early?
It's interesting, right? You could passage first here, right, and try and find a couple more card draw options from that to really set yourself up.
Right.
If you passage into one Swindle or one Shroud, you are feeling fantastic about your next couple of turns. Plenty of hand space to be able to make that happen as well. So I do think it's a very, very close one, because as it stands, he might just be a little bit light on juice to actually have a guaranteed solid pop-off turn with the field contact. The thing is, you do also want to get going and force your opponent to be defensive before they start playing threats. That's the other side of the dynamic.
Yeah.
And the threat of the Netheron is very real in this newer version of Warlock. Because if you can go off quicker, like if you played an Octobot that turn and then played a field contact the next turn, they have to kill your field contact. They have to allocate something to doing that, and you actually have the Divine Shield to go with it as well, which makes it doubly awkward.
Jarla there choosing to use the Shadow Step to get more stuff in hand here. Gives the One Thief spell damage.
Yep, using a Shadow Step takes the Shadow Step out of his deck so it doesn't get shuffled back in. Also puts a Ethereal Orc Merchant into his hand, which essentially deletes another card from his deck because he'll have the opportunity to play it if he wants with a field contact further down the line.
Perfect timing, because I was going to say, bear in mind, although it looks like Jarla's playing a bit fast and loose with his first Orc Merchant being used and dead now, his second one there having already used a Shadow Step on it. He does have this Guild Trader, right? He's not running Kazakus. He has the Guild Trader, which can push so much damage with that +2 spell damage, especially if you can hit the reductions which you aim for with the Octobot, that you can play a little bit more easier with your Shadow Steps and with the Orc Merchants because of that one Guild Trader.
However, problems have begun because Seiko's had the fast threat hand. He's got the Anetheron Null down, which, as we saw in the Handlock Mirror, is about the fastest way you can get threats down now while playing this deck, which means Jarla does not have the luxury to just play Solitaire in this particular game, because he now has to react to the pressure that's being put on him on the other side. And every turn he spends doing that is a turn that slows him down. Every time he has to use a Brain Freeze to prevent damage, that's potentially game-breaking, because I think Brain Freeze is perhaps the most underrated card in this entire matchup. We saw a game in the Americas region, I think it was Monsanto, right, where he was in a particular position. His opponent, which I think was McBanter face, just spent the whole turn counting lethal, decided he didn't have it, and just cast Brain Freeze on one of his opponent's giant, and Monsanto conceded because it ended the game. It's so good to just buy yourself an extra turn in that late game when you're going for lethal yourself.
And here, though, although Jarla is going to take a huge amount of damage if Seiko chooses for that to be the case, Jarla has set himself up for a great swing turn, right? He does have the 0-mana Prize Plunderer. He has a lot of stuff to do and not spend a ton of mana, so he can get a ton of card draw. So Jarla has at least given himself a chance here, but it does look grim just leaving the Null and the Anetheron on board to just punch him for, 13 minimum this turn?
Muzzle their magic.
The only safety net is that he knows Battleground Battlemaster could not come down that turn.
Look at this Cone of Cold from One Thief positioning, Raven.
Too quiet.
Could not be any better. Seiko's insane. He thinks of everything.
That's an upgrade. Probably.
So Prep Cram Session is available here for Jarla as well. Or Prep Brain Freeze now. And that should open up the Plunderer to kill the Anethron, I believe?
Yes, but again, that is a brain freeze flush down the toilet that cannot be used to lock out a giant later in the game, and those giants are already terrifyingly cheap at this point. Again, the luxury of the Guild Trader means that Shadow Step is a possibility for Jarla if he wants to go for it, because he does just still really have all the spell damage he needs from that single card with the Guild Trader to be able to achieve an OTK on his opponent.
Choose soon.
Once again, so why you're seeing Ethereal Orc Merchants being used incredibly liberally again. Does find the Pen Flinger now.
Yeah, that was a bit of a misstep though from Jarla, right? Well, not straightly a misstep.
Not necessarily.
But you know what I mean, right? He could have done the Orc Merchant first on a 1-1 and then used the Prize Plunderer. But I guess he might not have had to commit to it.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was deliberate, but I do also kind of agree with it, because plans change based on the card draw, and even if you need to do the one, you just have your Divine Shield Octobot that can do the one, right?
That's true. As long as you don't end up
playing the you don't end up playing the Ethereal Orc Merchant, you end up doing something else instead. I think it makes sense.
And there's a Soul Rend, and that's going to quite easily put Seiko in the 10 card or less range, which means hello, Baron Scavenger. He has burned a lot of cards though. Normally with Soul Rend you do want to burn a lot to get down, but Seiko is now just down to 6, so missed out on a few options, the second Soul Rend being one of them.
Contacts, Shadow Step,
Too quiet.
Brain Freeze? Probably not in that order. You probably take the card draw from the Brain Freeze before you do the Shadow Step, but I think as a bare minimum. Okay. Getting real close, right? But this is that exact kind of Ego Waffle Banterface situation that I was talking about, right? Where just the guaranteed one extra turn with Brain Freeze is so huge, because it just allows you whatever setup turn you want in this position. You see a Guild Trader being cycled there as well, which he didn't do last turn for 1 mana, which I find quite interesting, because it's one of the great things about Tradable is you can discount cards or put any enchantment that you want on them, and then trade them back into your deck, and they maintain those discounts or enchantments, right? So there's no actual downside to doing that as long as you're going to draw it back again. I guess since there was nothing he would have spent the mana on, I suppose, there was no point on doing it on the previous turn, but still interesting to look at, I guess. There it is!
Hello! May as well drop these, right? Get them more cards out, get some options. Flurry's a huge pickup. He can pretty much just buy another turn in most circumstances, right? In most outcomes.
What are these remaining 3 cards, though, at this point? Because one of them is the Guild Trader that just went back in.
A good question.
Because he does still need a procer for the Octobot, right? To be able to get enough mana together to be able to do that.
Oh, wait.
I did.
Wasn't one... Do you have a Swindle?
I think so, yeah.
I think one was Swindle, one's Guild Trader.
Okay.
The other one... Has he played double Guardian Orc Merchant this game?
I'm not sure.
One Divine Shield? I can't recall the second one.
Yeah, there was one on the Octobot, one on the Field Contact, right? On the turn where the Soul Rend came down.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that was Shadow Step or not.
Okay.
I assume from the fact that we're guessing that the deck tracker is not playing ball, by the way.
I mean, to be fair, he has Cram Session as well, right? So, yes, Cram Session Swindle, that'll be enough.
Getting any younger.
Yeah. Yeah, no, more importantly, I was just looking for like the Octobot procer left in the deck, right? Which is a really, really big deal overall. Because yes, even if he just has to use the Guild Trader, he still wants to discount that down to 2 first, ideally, even if his plan is to throw that out plus Cram Session, something like that. Like, it's a lot of mana that needs spending. His Garots still both cost 2 at the moment. His Guild Trader costs 3 at the moment when he draws it. He still has to get there, and he's out of Field Contact.
Can start with Step. This will activate the Swindle, which is, I imagine, what he wants to do initially. There's a Flurry that if he can mess with this board a little bit, he might even now go, what, Fire Sale Flurry? That help him enough? Spring Water's too expensive.
Yeah, that would kill the 5-2, freeze 2 minions, so as long as he didn't miss the 8-8 with both, he would still survive Battlegrounds Battlemaster.
Where's Quest up to for Seiko, though?
It's 5 out of 8, so it would need to be like a raised dead. He survives like BGBM tap is the important thing.
Right.
So it'd need to be raised dead, Shadow Blast, something like that alongside
This is nice.
a Battlemaster.
Gets to proc the Octo with it as well.
Yeah. But I think if he does make this play, because of Seiko's hand, he will die here, right? To Battlegrounds Battlemaster and the Unstable Shadow Blast. No, the Cult Neophyte can prevent that. Oh no, but it didn't hit the Giant! It didn't hit the Giant, Raven! The play's so good against the exact hand that Seiko had. The Cult Neophyte keeps him alive in every world where that Giant gets frozen, but it just dodged. The 8-8 dodged the freeze. 16 damage from the Wind Fury, and Seiko just about, by the skin of his teeth, stays alive in this series.
It really got tricky, that game, right? Mainly on Jarla's side, at least. Just because, like we talked about earlier, Rogue's a very difficult deck to talk about, cast, and inform you guys of all the things that Jarla may or may not be thinking of. But Jarla played pretty loosely with his resources that game. Guild Trade allows him to do that to an extent. But I do think, like, again, it's hard to just rebuild the game in my brain right now. But I do think, like, just being in that situation with no field contact, I'm not sure how necessary that was. But for Jarla, it was definitely one I'd have to go back and watch over again. But I do think Jarla ended up in a bit of a weird spot at the end of that game, and I would just love to know if he necessarily had to end up there based on what he had available to him.
Yeah, the moment that surprised me, we just saw it there a couple of clips ago. It was the turn where the second field contact came down, and he secret passaged away a Shadow Step that he had in hand, right? So he didn't... So literally, my first instinct that turn, I said it right away. Field contact, brain freeze, buy yourself the extra turn, end with the Shadow Step, have a field contact in your hand. He ended up not doing that. I think probably, again, I'd have to go back and count this personally, but he probably looked at a hand which was going to have 3 mana Guild Trader, 2 mana Garrote, 2 mana Garrote in it, and decided he was probably going to need to like Shadow Step Octobot at that point to get enough discounts to actually spend all the mana in one turn. That would be my theory. But then I'd have to raise the additional question of how are you proccing all of those Octobots, my friend? Because from what I could see, you had to discover a fire sale to even get the first proc going off. So yeah, really difficult endgame state. Jarla was not able to find his way through it successfully. It means Seiko gets on the board, and now Seiko gets to start to play some favorables. Glide, Demon Hunter coming up against the Garrote Rogue on the other side. This is a good matchup now for Seiko to potentially square up the series.
It really is. Things can turn around very quickly, and we might, well, we will. If Seiko wins this, we will have that Rogue mirror just to finish off the mirrored series overall. But Jarla's still got a chance in it now. Double Neophyte opening, does have that Shroud of Concealment as well, so he can actually not only disrupt some of Seiko's turns, but also keep the card draw flowing for himself as well.
Jarla considering these Neophyte timings above all else, I would imagine. Normally, turn 2 is not a turn where you're expecting your opponent to do anything impactful in terms of quest completion, spell setups for the foreseeable future. So I think using it to block turn 3 and turn 4 is usually ideal. But when you do that, when you have this double Cult Neophyte turn, the one thing you don't want to see is a Tusk Piercer, because not only does that allow them to relieve the pressure from your Cult Neophytes by just attacking into them, it's also the most efficient method in the entire deck to draw cards without casting spells.
Yeah, and also gets a little bit strange as well with Shroud in hand. It does mean that starts to be just stuck around for a little while, right? He doesn't get to play that on curve. Not that he necessarily needs to, but it does just mean he has to find the time to just fit all this mana in. He is going to back up this Neophyte with a Plunderer now, so it does mean just the weapon swing doesn't clean up the board, so it's a good little push here from Jarla. Seiko, of course, going to respect the Neophyte. They're tidied up, and see what he can do after the fact.
Pleasure doing business.
Now, does he want to go again? He does have Neophyte Swindle to keep the card draw going. Shroud becomes a little bit easier to fit into the turn's next turn when he's got 2 mana spare.
Yeah, I think this is certainly the #1 turn that you want to be playing Cult Neophyte in this matchup because, of course, this is the glide on curve kind of turn, especially if you are playing a card draw effect at the same time. We did see on the previous turn as well, Jarla just played a 2-1 Prize Plunderer before doing anything else.
Yep.
Looks weird. Looks like he's trying to just pressure down his opponent, rush them down with minions. That's not really it. You don't expect a 2-1 to just get there against Demon Hunter. It's just, sure, it's a little bit of pressure. Most importantly, it's keeping the hand size low. I guess we talked a little bit about, card counting and keeping a running count. Similar thing with Rogue versus Demon Hunter. You want the count to be high. You want your deck to be stacked with 10s, essentially, in regards to the analogy in this one. You want as much card draw in your deck as possible after you get Glide. So that means playing out a bunch of cards from your hand that don't say draw a card on them to increase that stacking of the deck after the fact.
Seiko going to have to do a bit of a desperate fell screen blast there just to clear this up, have something on board, but most importantly, just start at least planning to prepare his next turn, right? He does have that glide far left, no problem. He'll probably combo it with the coin as well.
And Jarla has a hand that can't really avoid getting baited by this glide.
Good field contact, shadow step, field contact, shadow step. Field contact?
It's quiet.
That helps, right?
it was a ridiculous suggestion, but I think it was rounded out nicely by just playing the field contact again at the end. Like, I think that was just the icing on the cake with the cherry on top.
Can't glide it if it's not in the hand.
Yeah. It's got to be done. There's just no other play, right? Yeah. But again, look at the dump, right? He just throws out 2 Ethereal Org Merchants, which means, yes, if this hand gets hit with Glide, yes, a 1-mana field contact goes back in the deck. That sucks. However, a Secret Passage, a Swindle, and a Shroud also get thrown back into the deck, which means he is plugging a huge ratio of card draw back into his deck overall, allowing his recovery turn from the glide to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, some of these matchups make Hearthstone look very weird, doesn't it? Right? Like, let's just dump the cards out. Let's make sure the card draw goes back in the deck, because that's a positive thing.
From where I'm sat, Raven, some of these matchups make Hearthstone look awesome. I would much rather watch 2 players doing stuff like this than just playing the green card on curve every time.
I never said it wasn't awesome.
Yeah.
Just weird.
I'm aware you're not on the other side of this argument, Raven, but some people are, so I'm going to argue with them anyway.
Through me, brilliant.
Exactly, yeah. You are just a conduit for suffering.
Scarily accurate. These are less dumpable cards from Jarla. He can, of course, get rid of this Plunderer, but I'm not sure about the others.
Yeah. It's very weird, again, just an unusual dynamic with the way that this weird deck works, but he just hit 3 of the best cards in his deck off the Secret Passage, and that makes it terrible.
Yeah, and he's upset.
Efficient is sufficient. It's quiet.
Whoa! He's just going in!
Okay. Bold play. Let's see if it pays off.
Okay, so I guess he drew a card instead of having a 1-1 on board because the discount means nothing, right?
Right.
So technically, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I do think what he did, he executed it correctly. It's just what he did I'm stuck at.
Because it is the only way to do it, right? If you go field contact first, you then have to prize plunderer your field contact because you've already played secret passage that turn, so the plunderer would kill the field contact.
Right.
So you can't do it in the other order. That's just the only order that play works in at all, right? It just looks really stupid.
Seiko probably feeling great about how this game's going so far because there are some ridiculous things happening on the other side of the board. Ugh.
That's an upgrade.
Such as... ISL for Cycle, I imagine, yep. Secret Passage for Cycle, I imagine. Unless he wants more mana to Secret Passage with next turn.
I think he's still fine, right? Again, I think anytime you could Secret Passage and play a Shroud or Swindle that you find off it, it's generally going to be good enough. And once again, he did stack his deck very heavily with those cards with the way that he's been playing around Glide in this matchup. Hasn't looked like it because the Glide has still absolutely destroyed him, but he has done it very well. Oh, come on. This is just cruel. Imagine being rewarded for playing well, Raven. Couldn't be Hearthstone. Yeah, Penflinger out on board, transfer it from the Secret Passage back to your hand, which you'll now go into after it gets bounced back. Get some value off the One Thief while you can.
Oh, yeah.
Picks up an Evocation, okay.
If there's ever an evocation game, it's this one.
Yeah, agreed. Double acrobatics in hand. Good news, bad news. Good news, you have a ton of card draw. Bad news, they're already in your hand, so they cost 3 and not 1, which is slightly less spectacular than it could be next turn if you were to just top deck one of them.
Does just have weapon now to be able to clear up Gordon. Has the 7/7 on board, and a ton of pressure coming up with those card draws, and Jarla just has to make something work, and honestly, even with our view, I don't know what that something could be.
Okay, to start, Penflinger Swindle. We go Penflinger Evocation. It's about the coolest way in the game to kill a Penflinger.
So many.
Probably not a good Hearthstone turn though.
Okay, there's Shroud.
Here it all is. Here it all is. Oh, look, 3 resource generating cards in a row. Oh, a tradable. Oh, a field contact. There you all are.
I've been there all along.
Yeah.
There's that brain freeze as well, so even if Jarla doesn't feel he can or wants to kill Kurtrus, he can just brain freeze it and move on to his next turn, right? So he could just wait now. The only problem is he is missing an Octobot to really make these things work.
He is indeed, yeah. One, of course, was killed by his own hand on the weird secret passage turn with the other field contact, but I believe there is still one remaining in the deck. His other Garrote is in there as well. He'll want that in his hand before he starts throwing out discounts. Even though this game has gone quite long, we have got to pay attention to the fact that he's, getting up towards 9 mana now on the following turn. That's a lot more mana than we usually account for when rogues are going for those kill turns.
This is the turn for Seiko, though. He can finally cash in on Kurtrus. Okay. I'm now slightly deaf and surprised.
The Fell Scream on the left costs 1. So currently he would need like a Philosophy to dupe that other Moarg, which, yeah, I don't see any even vaguely realistic route to actually try and get lethal that turn. Obviously he could have just jammed the Il'gynoth and the Moarg and drawn 2 more cards and just gone for it straight away. But even if you draw Philosophy at that point, right, you're then duplicating a 1-mana Moarg that you can't fit in with anything else. So I just don't think it works out.
Do you think it's important here that with all the card draw that's happened for Seiko, Jarla will just know he has to do something next turn, right? I don't think he can expect to live one additional turn now. He's just seen Seiko draw through a chunk of his deck, and generally, when they draw once, they can draw twice. So Jarla definitely on the back foot here, and we might be going to a game number 5.
Just I-beams to go back to 30. Takes the last tradable with the last mana, uses the I-beam while he can. Octobot is the draw, though, for Jarla.
Yeah, 9 mana, 3 cards in the deck. Octo reduction. Considering the way this game has gone, Sottle, it's about as good as it's ever going to get for Jarla, and I don't think he can wait, can he?
I don't think so either.
And we're talking from his perspective, not that we can see the cards in Seiko's hand.
Yep.
I just think he must have an idea that he can't really survive an additional turn here. He's not locking anything in.
Draws Guild Trader. I think he just doesn't have it, right? Like, I think this is the right thing to do based on the idea that he just doesn't have it, right? There's no reason, even though you might be scared of dying here, it's still a better chance to say, well, I don't have it this turn, so I have to wait and go for it next turn, than it is to just take a 0% lethal out, which is what I think this actually is with this hand, because his other Garrote is just still in the deck, right? He has to pay so much mana for his stuff at this point. I don't think he gets there.
And it is one of the drawbacks, right, of Guild Trader, is that if you rely on it, it is very mana intensive.
Yes. Especially when you haven't hit it with your Octobot discounts. Again, once you've started hitting it with your Octobot discounts, as Seiko, yes, drew cards, killed, win 1 game. Well done. Congratulations, 2-2. But once you start discounting the Guild Trader with those Octobots, you can then use it as a cycle card all you want, right? You can swap it in and out of your deck as many times as you choose, and it still retains those discounts. As soon as you don't hit it with a discount, and this is why I personally don't really like it as a card, it just always costs too much mana to weave in, right? If you're ever in a world where you have to pay basically anything for your Garrotes, then 4 mana on spell damage is just way too much to be weaving into a Hearthstone turn. I think that's the spot we got in there in the end, because his Guild Trader was still in his deck, so even if he drew that, it would cost 4 at the moment that he drew it, which means he would have to draw it without discounting any of the cards already in his hand. So he'd be spending 4, 5, 6 mana by the time he even got to the Guild Trader, and then he would have to play the Garrotes on top of that as well. Like, he was just never getting there at that point. So I think he took a very unlikely out that Seiko was unable to kill him, but I think it was better than the 0% he had if he tried to do it the other way.
And it does mean we are going to have this Rogue Mirror to end out this series, and interestingly enough, it might play out a little bit differently than we used to see in Rogue Mirrors, because a lot of the time they can be very tempo based in the early mid game, but a lot of that as well is really shown off with Kazakus, and both players running Guild Trader might mean that tempo is not only less powerful but way more manageable from their opponent, right? So we probably won't see, well, we definitely won't see any golems, but we won't see any big heavy pressuring tempo boards because of the lack of those golems coming out from no Kazakus in the list.
Yeah, I think the tempo is still scary. You know, a 3-2 and a 2-3-2s and 3-2-1s or whatever you get down on like an average field contact turn is still a lot of damage to be leaving up. But the fear factor of like +2/+2 or +1/+1 golems coming down to just really end out the game is totally gone. And like Divine Shield summon a copy 5 mana golem in the mid game is just not a thing that can be used to just build an unbeatable board straight away. So yes, it might lead to the matchup being a little more combo focused, but in general, the matchup for me is still tempo focused for the majority. I think the real skill and the real balance in the matchup is figuring out how to play for max tempo without entirely dismantling your kill potential at the end of the game, right? Like, you want to hold something back so you can still at least threaten, you know, maybe 24 damage coming through at the end of the game as an absolute maximum. But I think maybe if you want to look at it the other way, having that Guild Trader there as that one-off ability to just throw in a bunch of damage for one card might even allow players to do that a little bit more effectively, right? Because we've already seen Jarla throwing out Ethereal Org Merchants in weird spots where the Kazakus version of the deck would not be doing so. That can certainly help in this matchup, right? If you're just able to use more pings, more spell damage, more field contact draws, more Octobot activators coming from those spell damage minions instead, and still fall back on that guild trader later.
I'm just waiting for the day where we see the tempo guild trader. That's what I'm really...
Oh, yeah. Just a 3-4. It's just good.
And also look at the opening hands. Contact available for Seiko, Octobot, multiple ways to proc it. It's all starting to look okay, but he doesn't have any of those tempo options, right? There's no Cult Neophyte for him to play down this turn. He could just drop an Octobot if he deems it worthy enough with this hand, but I think it looks fine. Especially just because it is so likely to just stick, right? And even a 1-4 is enough tempo as a minion. Never mind what Octobot actually does is its ability. Looks good enough to me. Now, yeah,
we're going to have a
his Octobot.
Good old-fashioned bot off, Raven.
So many options.
There's nothing else he can do, right?
You could just play like Cult Neophyte, look to contest it on the following turn a little bit, but the only, like, you could look at this hand very greedily and say that you want to use like the Shroud, maybe get some resources from Secret Passage, and then just get a huge discount with the Octobot a little bit later on. But I think because of Seiko's start, he's accelerated the game to the point where you would fall quite drastically behind if you end up doing that. But Jarla is going to greed it. Okay.
Thinks he can get more value out of this. Here now, even though, again, it would look pretty weird, the potential for field contact Shadow Step this turn, and then next turn could look insane.
Could also do extremely bizarre things this turn, like Pen Flinger your Octobot, Shadow Step the Octobot, play your 1 Thief, which costs 0 at that point, replay the Octobot, Pen Flinger it again. 1 mana field contact in hand. Problem at that point is you just don't actually have any resources to go along with it.
True.
So I think middle ground is probably the best compromise here, as it usually is.
Combustion looks okay. Ignite's never too terrible, but I think I do like Combustion here.
Yeah, I think for the matchup, probably more interested in Combustion.
Now, does he... Okay, he's going to Shadow Step. I was wondering whether he was going to just like Brain Freeze his Octo or something for 1 extra draw, but... I'll keep hold of this for now. He's got plenty of draw opportunities going forward as well. Now, Jarla. He chose to be more value-based, and Seiko decided to be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe not with the board state itself, but with what he was doing with his turns.
That is a huge reward, though. The greed on the Shroud has hit now the 2 other best cards in his deck. Octo number 1 will discount Octo number 2 and a field contact, and Jarla will have an absolute world is his oyster turn in a couple of turns' time. The big question now, though, is how far ahead can Seiko get based on this more aggressive tempo start that he has gone for?
Yeah, the awkward thing is he doesn't really have the best tools to get the field contact cook in this turn. He's choosing to just back off a little bit, just go for a dagger pass, and then hope for next turn there's going to be targets for the likes of the Brain Freeze for 0 mana, the Prize Plunderer as well, and just have way more options going forward. But the problem is Jarla's follow-up turn going to be too strong?
How far in does Jarla go is the other question here as well. Like, 1 Octobot I think is coming down for sure. Has 2 options to activate it, but then after the activation he could also then immediately choose to activate the second one.
Many options.
But I think that is probably overkill at that point.
Efficient is sufficient.
Annoying that both of his Octobot activators are his actual good removal cards.
Right,
You know, I
that's
think
the
he'd
problem,
much
isn't it?
rather be using an Org Merchant in that position because both Prize Plunderer and Brain Freeze are actually super good tempo cards in the matchup to be able to create those swing turns. Because that's largely what a lot of the mid-game in this matchup looks like. It's just big swing turns back and forth as they use Field Contact, Prize Plunderer, Pen Flinger to clear the opponent's board while developing a board of their own, just turn after turn after turn. And if you start using Brain Freezes and Prize Plunderers like this, then you don't have as many resources left remaining to be able to do that for as long as your opponent can.
Okay, double Prize Plunderer now for Seiko.
It's quiet.
Can get this cooking with the Field Contact. I think he needs to. Got to be very afraid of what Jarla's hand contains now, especially with it being reduced. We can obviously see that there's another Octo in there. Gonna start going with this card draw. Still got 2 mana to play with. Can double Prize Plunderer and still take 2 more draws and go very wide on board. I wouldn't hate that at all. He wants this Pen Flinger back. He can actually go Brain Freeze, Prize Plunderer instead.
Wait a minute. Why that one? Surprised to see him Brain Freezing the 1 health minion there. Yeah, exactly, for this reason. Because now he's going to end up... Okay, going to Pen Fling it and Prize Plunder it to get them both down. Sure. Saves spell damage this way. Wouldn't have been able to fit in the Cod Neophyte anyway. Uses the Shadow Step once again to get 1 mana Field Contact back in hand. Card draw now relatively even, but Seiko has committed a Field Contact multiple times already. All Jarla has done is played Shrouds and Secret Passages, and he's actually keeping pace on the card draw right now, and now he's about to pull significantly ahead with this huge hand of discounts that he has.
Ooh. All pretty good options, honestly. He's going to go for the Mask. For some extra damage and potential board clear later on.
Give me that. Not what I want.
Looks like he wants the discount on the Octobot. Classic Field Contact sequencing, just using all of his discounted cards for as long as he possibly can in order to draw undiscounted cards and then dropping the Octobot at the end of the turn at the latest possible moment to be able to discount a whole bunch of other fresh cards.
Right.
And look at that board state that he has achieved. Double discounted one of his Garots as well. So he's in a decent position in terms of damage. Even picked up a Mask to be able to throw in there. Mask is useful in a couple of matchups. We talk about it a lot in the Warrior matchup with the Bulwark of Azzinoth, but because Rogue has damage permanence, there's no way that healing is going to come out. Just being able to throw out a Mask at any point in the game for a bit of extra damage can be very helpful.
Yeah, Seiko does have this Combustion as well. He might be going for something else now because he also has that Brain Freeze. So he's going to ping off these instead. Does have Prize Plunderer 2. So a lot of removal, but the problem is at this stage in the game, in this mirror, it feels like Seiko's just already too far behind.
Feel that way a little bit, yeah. Jarla's hand is slightly dry from this point, but he does have a ton of card draw to help him towards Field Contact number 2 specifically in this spot. Also worth noting that sometimes you can go too fast for Hearthstone to keep up, right? Like Jarla has 9 cards left in his deck. He only has 6 mana next turn. You actually cannot do that much with 6 mana under normal circumstances. So sometimes, even though you are further through your deck, as it looks like Jarla is in this position, both players kind of have to wait to get adequate mana to end the game, so it kind of cancels out when you get down to it. We might still see that situation happening because Jarla is also out of Octobots at this point. It looks like he's going in with the Field Contact.
It's quiet.
Just feel a lot safer because of the stealth, but we can see that Combustion.
He might still give it Divine Shield, though, which I think would be a masterstroke here. But no, he does end up using it offensively to clear the board. Does make the most sense. Obviously, he can't see the Combustion on the other side. Does now have options to play around that as well with the Shadow Step still. But I think As I said earlier, I think his biggest problem right now is that he's out of Octobots and his hand still costs a lot of mana. So I think this decision makes a lot of sense as well.
Yep. Slightly rough placement as well if we talk about Combustion, because he could have put everything to the left of the field contact and felt a lot safer. Is that another mask? Is he just dead?
He picked up Counterspell instead, which I think is very reasonable.
This is just a lethal push?
He has Garrots for one, but he can prep Swindle from this point, but I don't think he can fit the other Garrot in there, so I don't think it is. He might have outs, but I don't think it's guaranteed.
I'm almost out of cards.
Okay. So draw the other two, but yeah, no way to get the other Garrot in there first, right, and still cast the Swindle.
He's left a field contact on board by the looks of things. Oh no, he's not. He
still
traded
clears
into
it
it.
up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, okay.
I was a little bit worried because he made a mistake. I thought he'd not done the trade. I was like, wow, okay, that's a...
Wait. The Swindle legit costs 0, right? I thought he prepped the Swindle, but he still has the prep. So surely
Well,
the other Garrot... Surely the other Garrot could have gone in the deck in that case, right?
Yeah, prep Garrot and then Swindle was 0 because he double octo, didn't he? With a lot of that hand, hence why the mask costs 5.
Sketchy business.
Maybe that was the mistake.
Wasn't me.
Yeah, could see Jarla not happy with that one.
Choose soon.
Combustion now to clear up the field contact. Seiko doing his best to grind his way out of this.
Okay, Seiko needs to end with a guaranteed more than 10 health on board and on his face.
Yes. Which he has done, but even through Cult Neophyte, is there any way to get there with the bleeds instead? I don't think so, right? Secret Passage is just too expensive to be casting bleeds manually.
Yep. Does he just mask anyway and then do the thing next turn is his plan?
So many options.
He goes... Grow... Wait, prep does nothing. And he doesn't need the hand space.
Oh, does he just get it with the tradable instead? He gets 6 damage plus the 3 from the dagger, right? Yeah, okay.
Oh. That was tense! That was a really close series. It looked like Jarla was going to 3-0. Seiko fought all the way back to the last game, and Jarla even fumbled just a little bit towards the end there. But he does get the win, and he does move on to that upper bracket match there. He's going to be facing Frenetic shortly, but that's I think it's good for Jarla's sake that we do have these bigger breaks between these matches, right? When he's playing back to back, because I think after that ending of a fairly long series, he does need 10 minutes or so to recover, because that was not as confident and as clean as we used to seeing from Jarla.
Yeah, and that's my fault. We've actually tested that interaction before, right? Like, you might think that the tradable minion can come back at some point during that chain to make it interruptible, I suppose, but all of those draws happen essentially before the Guild Trader goes back into the deck, so you are guaranteed to draw all the bleeds first, and then you draw back the Guild Trader last thing. But Jarla, I think, just going through the motions there as well. I was way too focused on trying to find some weird out with casting the bleeds from the Secret Passage.
Trying to be too fancy.
But in the end, it turns out if you put some cards back in your deck, you can just play a tradable to pull them back out again. So even though a couple of sloppy turns in the end, Jarla did find it. And I think if you want to focus on the positive, he did find a very cute lethal in the opening game of the series as well with the Warlock, which really got him on track and to be in this position in the first place. He was miles ahead for the vast majority of that game as well, it has to be said. But you can see Seiko looking dejected as he sees these final 3 bleeds come out, which with the dagger is going to get the job done.
And honestly, so many of those games in this matchup were so scrappy, so close, and so I'm not even saying clumsy in a particularly negative way, but a lot of the wins felt like they were real stretches to try and get there. You know, super hard fought, a little bit messy in places, but really, really difficult. So yeah, really tough first matchup for both of these players. As you can see here, does mean Jarla moves on to the winners match. So if he beats Frenetic, he gets to move on to tomorrow, the final top 4, and Seiko does go down to that elimination match, which is going to be a little bit later on today with Seiko versus Felkane, and Seiko in that position along with Felkane now with 1 loss again, and you're done.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting